Many of you were able to attend the launch, and we hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did, although I'm sure that the view was not quite as unique. Here's a picture of the big bird sitting on the pad with the vertical assembly building in the background. We had banker's hours on this flight. We were able to get up around 5 or 6 in the morning, get suited up, make sure our suits worked okay, and walk out. We took one look at the big bird just before he walked into it, got on the swing arm and walked across and got strapped in. Helped the ground crew check out the spacecraft, and promptly at 11 she lifted off.
When the main engines ignited, there was a certain amount of shaking and rattling that was obvious. I was wondering if the solids had ignited, but when they touch off, there's no doubt. There's a tremendous feeling of commotion and power down there behind you, and a relentless push that just adds up to the ride of a lifetime. There's nothing that will ever even remotely approach the feeling of first stage on the solids. From my right-hand window, lying on the back, this is the view. If you turned your head 90 degrees to the right and watched, had a camera pointed out that way, you can see the roll maneuver. Then we went into the very thin overcast and quickly popped out the top.
Like Gordo said, it was the ride of a lifetime. Lots of vibration, lots of dynamics, and just a relentless push for 8.5 minutes into orbit. It just was a continuous, compelling, relentless acceleration and push all the way up there. We were able to perform our functions and talk and do our job, but we knew we had a tiger by the tail. The first stage, of course, burned for about 2 minutes and 6 seconds. I understand you had a good view of it as it came out the top of this cloud, a very spectacular shot. We were VFR on top, as the pilots say, very quickly with very little actual instrument time. The roll maneuver was performed precisely, and we got the separation of the solid rocket motors at 2 minutes and 6 seconds, and we didn't feel it or hear it, but we did see that flash of flame around the cockpit as the solid rockets were jettisoned and parachuted into the ocean, where they were picked up so that they can be refurbished and used again. This is a close-up picture of the solid rocket motor breaking away from the external tank.
It's interesting that as soon as the solids burn out and are jettisoned, everything smooths out absolutely as smooth as glass. It's the nicest ride, smoother than any airliner any of you have ever flown on.
We got the main engine cut off at 8 minutes and 34 seconds. We waited for the external tank to be jettisoned. This is an underneath picture of the tank being jettisoned and falling away from the spacecraft. Shortly thereafter, we ignited the maneuvering engines to put us into orbit. We made 2 firings of the orbital maneuvering system. So after about 45 minutes, we were in orbit and able to open the payload bay doors.
If you look quickly, that's Los Angeles, the South Bay, Palos Verdes Peninsula, then on down to San Diego. Then a few seconds later, that's the Salton Sea and the Imperial Valley in California, which greeted us as we opened that first payload bay door.
The sight was as spectacular for us as it was for you, and as you see it in these pictures here. It was truly a momentous event for us, and most impressive. The pictures and the memories don't do it justice. You just have to go back and do it again in order to appreciate it fully. The morning of the first day was when we first got the remotely controlled arm made by the Canadians into business.
Second day, actually, Jack, if you remember. And Jack had discovered some tile missing out in front of the windshield. If you notice those square, irregular patches in front of the windshield, those are actual missing white tile. So we moved the arm up and got it over to the right-hand side and looked along on a kind of a grazing angle here, but had a view and found some more tile missing. However, those were relatively insignificant. As it turned out, on entry, I've heard the number that the highest temperature noted on the top in the area of the missing tile was only 140 degrees or so.
Actually, the tile didn't slow us down much. We knew that lots of people would be concerned about it, and so we erased it from our thought and went on to do the other business. We did have some venting from one of the main engines that was with us for about 2 to 3 days, which we reported, and it was determined what the venting was. This is the way it looked, however, when the sunlight shone on it with a dark background. And as I mentioned, after about 2 or 3 days, it went away.
Now an inside shot. I'm at the manipulator operator station, and Jack has taken this movie right here as I brought the plasma diagnostics package out of the payload bay for the first time. We put the manipulator arm through the loaded operations, that is, with an attached payload for the first time in its ever, and exercised all the very complex sequences that the manipulator arm has built into it. Some of those involve manually positioning the arm, others with the software doing it automatically, and our job merely to monitor for safety considerations. We operated the arm night and day, so when the sun went down, we turned on lights in the payload bay and found that they were adequate to see it visually as well as operate our television system.
Periodically, it would show up in the overhead window as you see it pictured here, and then it would be moved to the forward part of the spacecraft up over the nose to make some measurements. And it was spectacular to watch it come real close and silently but smoothly move to its next point in the sequence, and this gives you the full appreciation of the total spectacle of the background. This is a picture that was taken as we were going over the Baja Peninsula in an ascending pass over the United States.
I'm bringing the plasma diagnostic package back in to latch it back down in its mounting mechanism. And this was one of the big questions on the flight, how well that mechanism would work. We found that the task was much easier than it had been done during any of the ground tests. In fact, the whole thing, which had been anticipated and planned to take maybe as much as 30 minutes, we did on 3 separate occasions in less than 5 minutes each time. And finally, here you see the arm being put back down in its cradle, its mounting mechanism, this in a backup mode, which is the crudest mode. If the whole primary system failed, we tested that backup mode and found that that whole thing of cradling the arm and rolling it inboard, as we're doing here, was very easily done, even with the lack of instrumentation that the backup system gives you.
One of the things we really enjoyed the most about being there was the ability to get around very quickly and easily. We could be anywhere in the spacecraft in a flash, and this is the head-first approach down through the hatch and down to the mid-deck where we had these stowage lockers in which we had lots of apparatus, equipment, clothing, and books and other kinds of things that we needed. If you didn't like the head-first approach, you could always do the feet-first one and glide down just about that quickly and be right where Mission Control wanted you to be. We had a number of experiments in the cabin to take care of. This is the plant growth unit that operated perfectly through the entire mission. We would read the temperature in the 6 plant growth compartments 3 times a day and read those back to the ground. One of the things that you'd all enjoy is the ability to manage packages very readily and easily up there. No need to set anything down, you just leave it float in space.
Here I'm working the electrophoresis experiment. I've taken one of the sample columns after it's been frozen in the main apparatus and stowing it in a holder and putting it back in a liquid nitrogen cooled freezer that we had that kept that frozen throughout the remainder of the flight and the trip back to Houston.
We had a hygiene area in which we could wash up, shave, brush our teeth, and so forth, and we had soap and running water, so it was very easy to keep yourself clean. And here's a picture of Gordo establishing himself in that area. And why don't you move the coat there, Gordo, and get it out of the way? Thank you. And of course, one of the things Gordo had to do was brush his hair every morning. Eating was a real pleasure. Of course, It's impossible to knock your milk off the table up there, kiddos. There's no way to get in trouble with Mom. You just leave things float around, and when you want them, you just grab them out of thin air, and you can eat standing on your head or however you please.
When you say eating was a real pleasure and you hear it from Jack Lousma, you can believe it. He really means it.
Most of the food that we had was mixed with water, and then we had a heater we could put it in if we wanted to make it warm. We had an exerciser on board that we used a couple of times, and we could position ourselves on it. It was a treadmill which was self-propelled, and get our exercise with no hands.
In the 10 minutes I ran on this treadmill, I think we should figure out the number. Something like 3,000 miles we traveled.
Here's a man who ran 3,000 miles in just a few minutes. But this was a new device that was added for this flight, and we think it performed very well and be a good addition for future flights. And we used it 2 different times.
We took the whole exercise thing very seriously. As you'll see, this was not the only thing we did to keep in shape.
Of course, you have to create work for yourself up in space. Your body does less work up there than it does when you're just lying in bed sleeping against the force of gravity. So we had to devise a number of exercise routines. Weightlifting and balancing act here. Now, not many of you can do this right here. He doesn't put them on one leg at a time like everybody else.
As soon as I get this down, I'm going to get a Dorothy Hamill wig and try out for the ice pack.
And, of course, Marines aren't happy unless they do their push-ups every day. That wasn't too tough, so, you know, look, one arm. And if you want to, you can do foot-ups. Now, if you really got frustrated, you could do this. Well, you really can see we didn't do much work up there, and finally came time to come home. So we got the payload bay doors closed and got a wave off for mission control. But finally the next day they decided they'd bring us in anyway, and here are a few shots that many of you were able to witness from the ground personally of the orbiter making its approach and landing at White Sands Northrop Strip there.
Near Holloman Air Force Base. We provided lots of support for the whole operation there.
The entry was as spectacular as the boost was in terms of dynamics and sensation and excitement and high adventure. It was a machine that slowed down from 25 times the speed of sound to 0 in about 25 to 30 minutes, and it felt like it just had the brakes on all the way, and we had one of the most spectacular quick tours at low altitude and high speed of the United States anybody will ever have. The airplane was flown manually from about 40,000 feet down to about 10,000 feet. Here's a picture out Gordo's window of what he saw from inside.
We're just rolled into the right bank, turning the 90-degree turn from our approach heading onto final approach. And as you see the White Sands come into view and look closely, the runway will become visible, but then go out of sight again. There's the approach to the runway right there. But because of the strong westerly wind, we had to crab to the right. Right now, Jack is engaging the audio system, and you can see it making a quick correction to the right, then back to the left. But with that correction for the wind drift, it's hiding the view of the runway until we get down here a little closer, and you'll be able to see our aim point come into view. You'll see a triangle and a rectangle. We were actually aiming for the rectangle, and there's some lights in there, not readily visible till just about now, that helped us determine that the guidance system had us exactly on the proper glide slope.
Okay, we got it firmly established on the inner glide slope, and then took over manually and made the landing and the rollout. We used the whole runway, although we didn't have to. It would have been possible to have stopped much sooner had it been necessary. And here is a final shot of the final part of the approach. Gordo got the wheels down at 275 knots, right on the money, and we broke the rate of descent right in here, and then landed and made the rollout. I noticed that the nose wheel was going down a little more quickly than I wanted it to, and had to hold it off some. In doing so, I over-rotated a little bit, kind of popped a wheelie there, but no harm done. And the Columbia made a good smooth rollout. At the end of it, we made a little nose wheel steering test and stopped it before the end of the drawn-out runway, although, as I mentioned, we just used very light braking and could have stopped it much more quickly. We assisted the ground personnel in securing the spacecraft and shutting down some of the systems. Finally, they decided to let us out, in spite of the fact that we wanted to stay a little longer, and met the sunshine there at the White Sands Missile Range. And we apparently picked the right time to come because the wind kind of abated and let up for us, although it picked up later. The support at White Sands was incredible, and it was a great team effort with NASA, contractor people, and the Department of Defense to provide landing opportunity there in a very short time. So it's a tribute to our whole American team for the way that the final part of our flight worked out.